Chapter 8. The Spark. The entire theater building seemed to vibrate with a nervous, amplified energy, a frequency distinctly different from the usual daily thrum of classes and rehearsals. Gala preparation was in full swing. Stepping inside from the late January chill, a damp, gray cold that promised more freezing rain or maybe snow later, felt like entering a pressure cooker. The air buzzed, thick with conflicting scents, the lingering sweetness of hairspray from quick costume changes, the sharp tang of rosin dust kicked up from studio floors working overtime, the faint aroma of coffee brewing constantly in the administrative offices, all layered over the familiar baseline of exertion and old building smells.
I found myself present in the building more frequently in the weeks since I started my investigation. The annual fundraising gala was coming up, and I attended endless planning meetings, reviewed vendor contracts, and pored over budget forecasts for the event itself. It was, I had to admit, fascinating in its own way. I had attended the gala for years, but observing the organized chaos, the sheer logistical effort required to mount an event designed to separate wealthy patrons from significant portions of their fortunes, was an education. The dedication was palpable, from the administrative staff juggling seating charts with diplomatic finesse, to the dancers pushing their bodies, to punishing limits in rehearsals for the gala's performance excerpts. I stood for a while near the doorway of Studio A, ostensibly reviewing staffing costs for the event on my tablet, but really watching the dancers work through a demanding piece scheduled for the gala program. Maestro Volkov was particularly ferocious today, his sharp commands echoing off the mirrored walls, demanding a level of perfection that seemed almost unattainable. Madame Farrell, the ballet mistress, moved among the dancers like a hawk, her eyes missing nothing, offering curt, technical corrections. The exhaustion was visible on the dancers' faces, mingling with fierce concentration. It was impressive, undeniably. The level of discipline, the translation of relentless physical effort into moments of breathtaking grace, it commanded respect. But my CFO brain couldn't entirely switch off. I saw the effort, yes, but I also saw the operational costs. The studio time, the coaching hours, the pianist's fee, the physical therapy, undoubtedly required afterwards. And, always, lurking at the back of my mind, was the anomaly I couldn't yet explain. The Pointe shoe budget. Seeing the intensity of this rehearsal, the force with which someone like Ivanov attacked the floor, certainly explained some shoe wear. But did it explain the exponential cost increase? The discrepancies Martha, the costumer, had hinted at? The worn-out shoes I'd seen myself? Later, I sat in another committee meeting, listening to projections for ticket sales, table sponsorships, and silent auction revenue. The gala was critical. Its success, or failure, would significantly impact the company's operating budget for the rest of the year, potentially influencing everything from production choices to dancer contracts. The company walked a perpetual financial tightrope, balancing artistic ambition against economic reality. That underlying financial vulnerability made the questions surrounding the regular operating budget, particularly that ballooning Pointe shoe line item, feel even more urgent. How could an organization striving for this level of artistic excellence tolerate such apparent financial discrepancies? Was it systemic inefficiency bleeding funds away? Careless management overlooking procurement protocols? Or, the more unsettling thought that kept surfacing, was it something more deliberate? My conversation with Martha echoed in my thoughts, her stress, her talk of cheaper substitutions, delayed orders, approvals stalled upstairs. It didn't align with the clean, albeit demanding, financial controls I expected and enforced in my own world at Stonewall Development. The dissonance was jarring. The meeting adjourned, and I took the long way back to the small office the company generously provided for my liaison work, needing a moment to process. My route took me past the warren of workshops backstage, including Martha's domain. Her door was slightly ajar, and as I passed I caught a glimpse inside. Amidst the usual controlled chaos of fabric bolts and costume racks, my eye snagged on a large canvas bin near her workstation. It was overflowing with dead pointed shoes. I paused, stepping back slightly so as not to be obvious. Satin was ripped and grimy, platforms crushed, shanks visibly broken or warped. They were undeniably used up, finished, casualties of the art form. I'd seen dancers toss similarly battered pairs into bins after rehearsals. Waste. Yes, but unavoidable, necessary waste, generated by the intense physical demands. And then, an idea sparked, clicking into place with the satisfying neatness of reconciling a complex balance sheet. It addressed the gala's need for unique fundraising opportunities, while also potentially offering a new angle on my quiet investigation. What if this waste,
wasn't waste at all. What if it was an asset? Dancers, especially principals, often developed rituals around their shoes, breaking them in meticulously, shaping them to their feet. Patrons, especially serious balletamanes, craved connection, authenticity, a tangible piece of the magic they saw on stage. Signed Pointe shoes, not the utterly destroyed ones in the bin perhaps, but shoes that had been used by the dancers. Shoes that had graced the stage, now retired but still holding their shape, signed by the artist. They would be unique auction items for the gala.
We could frame them beautifully, maybe alongside a photograph of the dancer in performance.
We could potentially sell signed shoes from soloists or corps members as ongoing merchandise online or at the theater shop. A new revenue stream, directly linked to the dancers themselves, leveraging their artistry in a different way. It felt like a genuinely strong fundraising concept. It was personal, unique to ballet, relatively low cost to implement, and offered patrons something truly special.
It aligned perfectly with the gala's goals.
My internal monologue constructed the pitch points almost automatically. Unique value proposition, strong emotional connection for donors, potential for high ROI at auction, positive PR highlighting the dancers.
And, a quieter, more analytical part of my brain acknowledged, it provides the perfect, unimpeachable reason to inquire systematically about the supply, condition, and turnover rate of used Pointe shoes. How many retired but suitable for signing pairs could Martha realistically provide from the principal dancers over, say, a month? Would the number align with the astronomical replacement rates suggested by the budget logs? Or would collecting them reveal the scarcity Martha had implied? Would the physical inventory, or lack thereof, tell a story the spreadsheets weren't? It was a way to gather data, discreetly, under the entirely legitimate guise of a promising fundraising initiative. I could track the collection process, see the actual condition of the retired shoes firsthand. I allowed myself a small, internal smile. It was elegant, really, served the company's fundraising needs, while simultaneously gathering intel relevant to its financial health. I could frame it entirely as a positive contribution, driven by a desire to support the artists and the institution, which was true. The other layer, the investigative angle, could remain my own. I started mentally drafting the proposal for Armand and the Gala committee, focusing on the fundraising potential, ready to present the signed Pointe shoe initiative as the next bright idea from the board's finance liaison. The first step, however, would be pitching it to Armand. That, I suspected, might require its own carefully choreographed approach. The idea took root quickly, branching out in my mind with satisfying logistical possibilities, even as I walked back towards the administrative wing.
Signed Pointe shoes. It was elegant, leveraging an intrinsic asset, the dancer's hard work materialized in worn satin, for tangible financial gain. It resonated with the patron's desire for connection, offered exclusivity, and, critically, provided a legitimate framework for examining the very items at the heart of my financial concerns. The dual purpose felt efficient, a very Stonewall approach perhaps, though I doubted my father or uncles would appreciate applying it to a ballet company's fundraising. My first hurdle was Armand Dufour, the company's artistic director. Armand was passion and ego embodied, a man who lived for artistic triumphs and grand gestures, less concerned with the mundane realities of budget lines unless they directly impacted his ability to stage opulent productions. Getting his buy-in for something as prosaic as selling used shoes, even signed ones, would require careful framing. I mentally rehearsed my pitch, focusing on patron engagement, exclusivity, and, crucially, potential revenue.
The language Armand understood best when it wasn't directly related to choreography.
I asked his assistant for 15 minutes of his time, navigating the packed gala prep schedule and finally securing a brief slot between his meeting with the lighting designer and a donor call.
Armand's office was a reflection of the man himself, elegantly appointed with plush seating and dark wood, yet simultaneously chaotic. Framed photos of himself with famous dancers jostled for space with overflowing stacks of musical scores, costume sketches pinned haphazardly to a corkboard, strategic plans half buried under rehearsal notes, and at least 3 different steaming mugs of what smelled like strong, black coffee. He sat behind a large, imposing desk, waving me towards a velvet armchair with an air of magnanimous impatience, already looking at his watch. The winter light filtering through his large window seemed grayer here, subdued by heavy drapes. "Julian," he began, his voice rich, theatrical. "Delighted you could squeeze me in. Time is a tyrant during gala season, non? He gestured vaguely at the papers surrounding him. Budgets? Always budgets. But necessary, I suppose. He gave me a look that suggested he found financial details mildly distasteful, but tolerated my presence as the Stonewall liaison. Armand, I began, keeping my tone respectful but efficient. Thank you for the time. I know how busy things are. I wanted to propose a new, potentially high-impact fundraising initiative specifically for the Gala auction, and perhaps beyond. He leaned back, steepling his fingers, intrigued despite himself. Indeed. Not another plea for cuts to the Nutcracker budget, I hope? He asked archly. No, nothing like that, I smiled briefly. This is about leveraging a unique asset we already possess. I propose auctioning Pointe shoes worn and signed by our principal dancers. I laid out the concept concisely. The emotional connection for patrons. The tangible piece of performance history. The exclusivity. Imagine the bidding, Armand, for a pair of shoes worn and signed by the artist. It's offering collectors a unique artifact. I deliberately used the word artifact rather than used shoe. We could frame them beautifully, perhaps with a performance photograph. Low cost for us, potentially very high return. I also floated the secondary idea. And perhaps signed shoes from soloists, even core dancers known for specific roles, could be offered at a fixed price in the company shop later. A steady, smaller revenue stream. Armand listened, his initial skepticism warring with his inherent showmanship and, likely, his constant awareness of the company's financial needs. He stroked his chin theatrically. My dancers' sweat-stained shoes? He mused, testing the phrase. Are we running a rummage sale, Julian? Or a premier cultural institution? He waved, a dismissive hand. Honestly, I need six-figure table sponsorships. Major corporate underwriting, not discarded footwear. Think of it differently, Armand. I countered smoothly, keeping my CFO hat firmly on but appealing to his artistic sensibilities. This isn't about discarded footwear. It's about capturing a moment of artistry, like a signed score from a composer, or a painter's used brush. It's intimate, authentic. Several major companies have had success with similar initiatives. The connection it creates between patron and dancer is powerful. It fosters loyalty, deeper engagement. I leaned forward slightly. And financially, the potential ROI is significant. Production cost is minimal. The shoes exist. The signatures are free. Presentation would be key, of course. Elegant shadow boxes, certificates of authenticity. But the bidding? For a piece of Petrov's power? Chen's grace? Laurent's upcoming Giselle? I saw his eyes light up slightly at the mention of Giselle, Elena Laurent's highly anticipated debut, highlighting his brilliant dancers, the stars he nurtured. That was the key. He considered it, tapping a long finger against his desk blotter. Signed shoes. He tasted the words. Presented elegantly, you say? Absolutely. Museum quality, I assured him. Principals only. For the main auction, of course. He stipulated immediately. We must maintain exclusivity for the high-value items. Agreed, I nodded. And this collection process, he waved vaguely, it must not interfere at all with rehearsal schedules, especially not Giselle. Volkov would have my head. And Madame Farrell? He shuddered dramatically. Minimal disruption, I promised. I missed us. I envisioned coordinating quietly with Martha in wardrobe to gather recently retired pairs over the next week. The dancers would only need a few moments to sign them before the gala. Armand seemed to reach a decision, swayed perhaps by the potential revenue, the PR angle, or simply the novelty appealing to his theatrical nature. Very well, Julian, he conceded with a grand gesture. Proceed. Principals only for auction. Ensure the presentation is impeccable, and keep it out of my hair and away from Volkov's rehearsals. He immediately picked up a score, already dismissing the implementation details, his approval granted. Now, if you'll excuse me, the lighting cues for the Gala divertissement require my genius. I thanked him and made my escape, feeling a surge of satisfaction mixed with the continued hum of my underlying objective. Step 1. Complete. Armand's approval, however conditional, was secured. Now for the more delicate task, involving Martha and observing her reaction to the practicalities of sourcing these artifacts. Later that afternoon, I found Martha back in her workshop, meticulously stitching sequins onto a bodice. The room was quiet now. The earlier frenzy subsided into focused work. The space heater hummed its low tune. Martha, I said softly from the doorway. She looked up, her expression neutral. Mr. Stonewall. I stepped inside, keeping my tone light, positive. Good news! Armand has approved a new fundraising idea for the gala. And potentially beyond. I explained the concept briefly. Principal dancers signing recently used Pointe shoes for auction and potential sale. We think it could be a wonderful way for patrons to connect with the dancers and support the company. I paused, then made the request. So, we'll need to start collecting suitable pairs over the next week. They need to be clearly used, authentic, show the work, but still visually presentable enough for signing and elegant display. Can you help coordinate gathering appropriate pairs from the principals as they retire them? Martha stopped stitching, her needle poised mid-air. She looked down at the bodice in her lap, then slowly up at me, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, a flicker of something. Weariness? Skepticism? It crossed her face before being smoothed away. Suitable pairs, Mr. Stonewalls? She repeated my word, her voice carefully neutral but with an undertone I couldn't quite decipher. She sighed, a barely audible sound. Well, I can certainly put the word out to the principals. Ask them to set aside pairs they feel meet that description. She paused, seeming to choose her words with immense care. But given what I told you earlier, about the quality we've sometimes been receiving, about how long the dancers have to make shoes last these days, she gestured towards the bin of truly destroyed shoes I'd seen earlier, which was still overflowing. Finding pairs that are retired gracefully, but still presentable. Well, there might not be as many as you envision. She finally met my gaze, her eyes conveying a depth of practical, lived experience. I'll see what I can gather. I'll start asking today. But, she added, her voice dropping slightly, don't expect hundreds. They use them until they're well and truly dead, Mr. Stonewall, especially lately. Her response was precisely calibrated, cooperative on the surface, yet subtly reinforcing the narrative of scarcity and poor quality she'd hinted at before. It wasn't refusal, but it wasn't enthusiastic compliance either. It was another data point, carefully filed away in my mental ledger. The signed shoe initiative was officially underway, a promising fundraiser for the gala, and, just as I'd hoped, a quiet probe into the troubled heart of the Veridian Ballet's Pointe shoe paradox. Armand's conditional blessing, however theatrical, was the green light I needed. Martha's weary cooperation, laced with warnings about scarcity, was the data point that kept my internal alarms humming. Now came the step that felt both operationally necessary and personally complicated. Discussing the signed shoe initiative with the dancers themselves, starting with the principals, and the principal who increasingly occupied my thoughts, both professionally and, I had to admit, personally, was Elena Laurent. I found my opportunity late the following afternoon. The punishing schedule of gala rehearsals layered onto preparations for the upcoming Giselle meant the studios rarely fell silent before evening. I'd timed my visit hoping to catch the end of the Giselle Act 2 rehearsal, the section focusing on the Willis, ethereal, demanding, notoriously hard on pointed shoes. Standing discreetly near the entrance of Studio A, partially hidden by a stack of unused portable bars, I watched the final run-through. The air was thick with the familiar sense of hard work, rosin, sweat, the faint sweetness of the pianist Madame Moreau's perfume, mingling with the sharp tang of disinfectant from an earlier floor cleaning. The late afternoon winter light slanted through the tall, arched windows, weak and gray, doing little to warm the vast space, though the heat generated by the dancers themselves kept the chill at bay. Madame Farrell stood near the front, arms crossed, her expression hawk-like, while Volkov paced restlessly near the mirrored wall, occasionally barking out corrections in his thick accent. And then there was Elena. In rehearsal clothes, her command of the stage remained absolute, even in the more subdued role in Act 2. There was an astonishing contrast between the ethereal quality of her movements, the floating arabesques, the impossibly controlled balances, the delicate footwork that barely seemed to touch the floor, and the sheer, visible strength required to execute them. Her focus was absolute, a shield against the fatigue that must have been settling deep into her bones after hours of repetition. Yet beneath the technical perfection, I thought I glimpsed something else today. A flicker of vulnerability in her eyes during a particularly difficult sequence. A slight tremor in her supporting leg held just a fraction too long. The pressure of this role, layered onto everything else, it was immense. When the final haunting chords faded, and Madame Farrell finally called, "All right, finish there for today," A collective sigh seemed to sweep through the exhausted dancers. They broke formation, heading towards bags and water bottles, stretching aching muscles, the disciplined energy dissolving into weary relief. Elena stood alone near the center for a moment, eyes closed, taking slow, deep breaths, her chest rising and falling beneath her damp practice tunic. Even in exhaustion, she possessed an innate elegance, a centered stillness that drew the eye. This was my chance. Waiting until she'd retrieved her water bottle and was leaning against the bar, beginning a slow cool-down stretch, I moved out from the shadows. I approached her quietly, respectfully, aware of intruding on her process, aware of my suit feeling distinctly out of place amidst the leotards and leg warmers. Laurent. I kept my voice low, not wanting to draw attention from the other departing dancers. Apologies for interrupting your cool-down. Might I have a quick moment? She looked up, her eyes widening slightly in surprise at finding me beside her. A sheen of perspiration highlighted the elegant lines of her face and neck. She straightened slowly, her professional composure clicking instantly into place, though I could still see the fatigue shadowing her dark eyes. Mr. Stonewall, she acknowledged, her voice soft but clear, neutral. Of course. I got straight to the point, wanting to minimize the intrusion. I was hoping to discuss a new fundraising initiative. The board's finance committee, in conjunction with Armand, is launching for the Gala. I explained the signed Pointe shoe concept concisely. Auctioning principal shoes, potentially selling others later. I focused on the benefits. We think patrons, especially those passionate about the company, might truly value owning a piece of performance history, signed by the artists who brought it to life. It's a tangible connection, and hopefully, a significant boost to the Gala's fundraising targets, which, as you know, are critical this year. I watched her face carefully as I spoke, gauging her reaction. Her expression remained professionally polite, but I detected a subtle shift, a flicker of something in her eyes. Wariness? Surprise? It was hard to read. She listened intently, her head tilted slightly. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. Signed Pointe shoes, she repeated softly, as if testing the idea. It's an interesting concept, Mr. Stonewall. She paused. From a fundraising perspective, I can see the appeal. Her gaze met mine directly now. How many pairs would be needed? And how exactly would they be collected? Practical questions first. Always practical. Initially, just for the Gala auction, perhaps 2 or 3 pairs from each principal dancer, I clarified. We'd be looking for shoes that are recently retired, obviously used, showing the work and history, but still relatively intact and presentable for signing and display. I deliberately used the word presentable. Martha in wardrobe will coordinate the collection over the next few weeks, asking you all to set aside suitable pairs as you finish with them. Elena nodded slowly, absorbing the information. I see. Another pause. Then she added, her voice still level but with a nuance I couldn't quite place. If it helps the company, then of course, we will cooperate. Then came the echo of Martha's caution. Though finding pairs that are retired but still presentable, that might sometimes be a challenge, Mr. Stonewall. They tend to be thoroughly broken by the time we let them go. Her choice of words, presentable, challenge, snagged in my mind, resonating perfectly with Martha's earlier warnings about quality and making shoes last. Was she subtly confirming the scarcity issue? Or was it simply an accurate statement about the hard life of a pointed shoe? My internal CFO flagged it as another data point requiring correlation. The business part of our conversation seemed concluded, but neither of us moved immediately. The studio was emptying quickly now, the remaining dancers gathering their belongings, their quiet conversations a low hum beneath the vast ceiling. The pianist, Madame Moreau, was closing the lid over the Steinway keys. The weak winter light outside the windows was definitely beginning to fade towards dusk. Seizing the slight pause, driven by a curiosity that felt less about finance and more about her, I asked, the Giselle preparations seem incredibly intense. That Act 2 excerpt looked formidable. A flicker of something real crossed her face then. Surprise at the personal question, quickly masked by professional discipline, but not before I saw it. It is, she admitted, her voice softer now. She looked towards the empty center of the studio where she had just been dancing. It demands everything, technical control, absolute stamina, but also vulnerability. It's terrifying, honestly. She offered a small, self-deprecating smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. Trying to embody a ghost while feeling painfully solid and exhausted isn't easy. Her honesty was unexpected, disarming. "I can only imagine," I said, meaning it, watching her. Even in rehearsal, I could see the layers, the fierce discipline, the artistic sensitivity, the physical strength, and now, this glimpse of the immense pressure she carried. I noticed the elegant line of her neck, usually held so regally, seemed slightly less guarded now, the exhaustion allowing a trace of weariness to show in her posture. A stray wisp of dark hair had escaped the severe bun coiled at her nape, clinging damply to her temple. She seemed to observe me in return, her dark eyes holding mine for a fraction longer than necessary. Perhaps she saw the man beneath the CFO title, the Stonewall name. Someone slightly out of place in her world. Analytical. Maybe intrigued. The air between us shifted subtly, charged with an awareness that went beyond bored liaison and principal dancer. The space between words grew longer, filled not with awkwardness, but with a quiet, unexpected current of connection. Even as I felt that pull, that undeniable intrigue, the analytical part of my brain remained stubbornly online. Her comment about finding presentable shoes still echoed. As we stood there, my gaze unintentionally dropped to her feet. The pointy shoes she was currently wearing, the ones she'd just rehearsed Giselle in, looked not new. The satin at the tip was slightly frayed, the sides visibly softened. Were these standard wear for a single demanding rehearsal, or were they already being pushed beyond their optimal life, just as Martha suggested? Just then Talia Morales walked past us towards the exit, offering Elena a tired smile. I couldn't help but notice the significant amount of tape reinforcing the ankle of Talia's shoe. More evidence? Or just the normal rigors of the profession? The internal conflict intensified. I admired Elena's dedication, her grace under pressure, the glimpse of vulnerability she'd allowed. Everything about her seemed authentic, rigorously honest. Yet the numbers on my spreadsheets, Martha's veiled warnings, the visual evidence of worn shoes, they told a conflicting story about the resources supposedly available to her and the other dancers. Could someone with her apparent integrity be complicit in hiding something about the shoe supply? Unlikely. But could she be unaware? Or simply accepting a broken system as normal? Or were they all victims of something larger, something systemic and hidden? The moment stretched, the silence charged with unspoken questions on both sides perhaps. Finally, Elena seemed to gather herself, her professional composure returning like a shield. "Well, Mr. Stonewall," she said, her tone polite once more, "I should finish cooling down. Please let Martha know we'll cooperate with the shoe collection." "Thank you, Ms. Laurent," I replied, matching her professional tone, though the brief connection lingered. "I appreciate your time, especially after such a demanding rehearsal." She offered a slight nod, then turned back to the bar, her focus already withdrawing, retreating back into the disciplined world of the dancer. I stood there for another moment, watching her elegant stretch, my mind a complex mix of admiration, intrigue, and undiminished suspicion. The interaction had deepened my interest in her immeasurably, made the cold financial investigation feel suddenly, uncomfortably personal. But it hadn't answered my core questions. If anything, her subtle confirmation of the difficulty in finding presentable retired shoes only reinforced the feeling that the numbers weren't adding up. The Gala initiative would proceed, but my private investigation felt more necessary than ever. I walked away from Studio A, leaving Elena Laurent to her cool-down stretches, the echo of our conversation lingering long after the piano notes faded down the corridor. Back in the relative anonymity of the administrative wing, I replayed the interaction in my mind, analyzing it with the same focus I'd apply to a complex financial statement. Her professionalism was impeccable, her dedication palpable. That glimpse of vulnerability when discussing Giselle had been unexpected, humanizing, pulling at something beyond my role as board liaison or CFO. There was an undeniable current between us, a spark of mutual intrigue that complicated the professional distance I usually maintained. She represented the pinnacle of the artistry this company produced, the very reason patrons wrote checks and the Stonewall Foundation invested. Protecting the company's integrity suddenly felt intertwined with something else, a nascent, unwelcome desire to protect her, to understand the pressure she navigated with such outward grace. But then the CFO part of my brain, the part trained to trust data and ferret out inconsistencies, took over. I forced myself to push aside the resonance of her presence. the memory of her dark eyes holding mine. Her words about finding presentable, retired shoes, they clicked precisely into place alongside Martha's weary warnings. "Might be a challenge," she'd said. "They tend to be thoroughly broken." It aligned perfectly with the visual evidence of worn-out shoes in the studio, yet clashed violently with the budget lines suggesting a steady, costly stream of new replacements. Was her comment merely a statement of fact about the grueling nature of her profession? Or was it a subtle, perhaps unconscious, confirmation of the scarcity Martha described? The numbers didn't lie, I reminded myself, but they could be manipulated. And someone, somewhere within this organization, seemed to be manipulating them regarding these shoes. Elena's comment, however innocently intended, became another piece, reinforcing the narrative of discrepancy. Putting the personal intrigue firmly aside, or attempting to, I focused on action. Back in my borrowed office, I drafted a concise, enthusiastic email to Armand and copied the Gala committee chair, formally outlining the signed Pointe shoe initiative. I detailed the plan for collecting shoes via Martha, the signing process involving the principals, the proposed elegant presentation for the auction items, and the potential for ongoing merchandise sales. I attached projected revenue estimates based on similar initiatives at other companies, adjusting for Veridian-specific donor base, highlighting the significant potential ROI. I hit send before I could second-guess the dual purpose behind the idea. Within hours, the wheels were in motion. An official memo circulated from Armand's office, announcing the initiative to the principal dancers and relevant staff, framing it as an exciting opportunity to connect with patrons and support the company. There was a ripple of positive buzz through the administrative offices. It was a novel idea, tangible, something different from the usual plea for straightforward donations. I saw staff members discussing potential display designs, heard the development team talking about how to leverage it in Gala marketing materials. Outwardly, it was exactly what I'd intended. A well-received fundraising contribution from the diligent board liaison. A day or two later, I made a point of stopping by Martha's workshop again, under the guise of checking on the initiative's progress. The controlled chaos seemed slightly more controlled today, perhaps a lull before the final Gala costume push. "Martha," I greeted her casually, leaning against the doorframe. "Just following up on the signed shoe project. Have you had a chance to mention it to the principals? Any luck starting the collection?" She looked up from sorting through a mountain of different width white ribbons, her expression unchanged. Neutral, weary, professional. "I've put the word out, Mr. Hayes," she confirmed, her voice flat. "Told them to set aside any pairs they retire that aren't completely shredded." She held up a ribbon, squinting at its color against a swatch of satin. "A few have trickled in." She gestured towards a small, surprisingly empty-looking bin tucked under her table. "Like I said," she met my gaze briefly, pointedly, "don't expect a flood immediately. They use them until they're well and truly dead. Especially lately." Her words, delivered without inflection, landed like stones. Don't expect a flood. It directly contradicted the budget implications of frequent, high-volume replacement. Another piece clicked into place, reinforcing the scarcity narrative. I thanked her and left, the image of that small, sparsely populated bin imprinted in my mind. The following week was a blur of Gala-related meetings, and my actual Stonewall development responsibilities demanding attention via emails and increasingly impatient calls from Martin Jenkins, which I routed through my assistant with instructions to demand proper budget proposals co-signed by Quinn. I sat through Gala committee discussions about seating charts, scrutinizing donor lists, and ensuring appropriate recognition for Stonewall contributions, while half my mind mapped out potential trails through Veridian's purchasing and accounts payable systems. I approved catering invoices for the Gala, while mentally flagging vendor names associated with Pointe shoe supplies for later, discreet investigation. I kept seeing Elena, too, in hallways, occasionally in the commissary, and frequently during my observations of rehearsals. Our interactions were brief now, always professional, limited to polite nods or brief greetings. Yet, the awareness between us remained, a low hum beneath the surface. I found myself watching her more closely during rehearsals, admiring her artistry, yes, but also looking for something, any sign that contradicted the image of dedicated professionalism. I found none. If anything, her focus seemed more intense, her discipline more rigorous as the Giselle debut and the Gala performance loomed. My suspicion regarding any direct dancer involvement in financial irregularities lessened further, solidifying around the idea that they were likely victims, caught in a system that was failing them while benefiting someone else. But who? And how? The ambiguity remained, fueling my determination.
The gala preparations surged forward, gathering momentum like an approaching storm, albeit one involving sequins and champagne rather than thunder. The signed shoe initiative was frequently mentioned in planning updates as a highlight of the auction. Outwardly, I played my part. The engaged board liaison, the financially savvy CFO contributing innovative fundraising solutions. Internally, I was assembling puzzle pieces, formulating quiet strategies for accessing payment records, cross-referencing supplier invoices with inventory logs Martha likely wasn't privy to. The shoe initiative wasn't just a fundraiser anymore. It was becoming a quiet audit, conducted under the cover of philanthropic sparkle.
The personal complication represented by Elena Laurent was an unwelcome variable in my usually ordered world. The memory of that charged moment of connection, that glimpse of vulnerability beneath her control, made the investigation feel fraught in a way straightforward financial analysis never did. The stakes felt higher now, not just uncovering potential fraud within an institution my family supported, but understanding the truth behind the struggles of the artists, like Elena, who poured their lives into their work within its walls. As early February settled over the city, bringing with it the promise of more snow and the escalating frenzy of the final gala countdown, I felt poised on a threshold. Ahead lay the glittering facade of the gala itself, an event demanding my public participation, but beneath it lay the murky depths of Veridian's ledgers, demanding my private, forensic attention. Navigating both would require a delicate balance. Indeed, the path forward was clear, even if the destination remained shrouded in financial fog.